right, welcome back. We're now in Module 6.
Module 6.
We've gone through the first 5, and this module today is going to be about nutrition, but I want to make clear before we get rolling here, we're not speaking about nutrition in terms of us being nutritionists and telling people what to eat or being a dietitian. We're going to look at nutrition more about how it affects the systems. For example, what kind of stress does it cause on our liver? What sort of stress does it cause on our pancreas, that fight between them? So it's really about pH balance in blood. So when we speak about nutrition today, we're not directing you in terms of what exactly to eat, but how its effects on the system are. We'll go into some food quality, soil qualities, and some other subjects as well in relation to it. So I guess we'll get rolling. Jay?
Yeah, so, we're definitely not, some of you may be holistic nutritionists, some of you may be, not everyone here is, some of you may also be, potentially a registered dietitian. Yeah. So, we're not going to that degree. That's not really the level of education we're trying to share here. I'm just trying to go over the idea of nutrition and how nutrition plays a role in relation to our health, more specifically our microbiome, right? And that's some of the stuff we're gonna get into, and more of the behind story about why, how does nutrition become important? What are really some of the ideas or concepts that we have to understand in relation to why food quality is important, or why our food quality is actually poisoning us, right? Those are the things we have to understand. So it's kind of what we're going into. If you want to know more about nutrition, obviously there's the registered dietitian 4-year program. Yep. There's that. There's holistic nutrition schools that are out there. There's IIN, Institute of Integrative Nutrition. Precision Nutrition, if you're looking more at it from like a macro, macros, performance, body composition idea. And these are some things that we go into. So it really depends on the depth you would like to go to. My personal practice, I don't give meal plans. Right? That's not really what I do. No. I say this is a diet type that you should be eating in order to support your microbiology, which is primarily my main focus when I work with chronic disease and chronic pain and health optimization. But I don't really do the macro department, not really something I'm interested in anymore. That is what I did for a very long time. And these are some things that we'll talk about.
Fantastic. It really definitely is a great way to get into nutrition without really talking about nutrition, but understanding the root causes behind it.
Yep.
So it definitely works better. All right, so first we're going to go into soil quality, and I guess we'll talk about what soil quality is. So
soil quality, we're really looking at, how does our soil affect our food? That's a primarily idea that we're talking about here. So you can see here the capacity for a specific kind of soil to function within natural or managed ecosystem boundaries to sustain plant and animal productivity, maintain and enhance water air quality, and support human health and habitation. So, these are ideas that we need to understand when it comes to soil quality. So you can see there the little picture under the veil of deception. That is a PDF from the Czech Institute. I believe that PDF is from 2002. So it's about, almost 19 years old now, and it is still highly valid and accurate, okay? Yes, there might be certain things that have changed, but from a conceptual overview, I don't think that most of you have ever learned about soil or how soil affects our food and therefore how our food affects us. We look at things very downstream because we're removed from our food sources and where they come from and how they're made and everything like that. Right?
I was just thinking that as you said that this is definitely a different approach, because we all think about my food is organic, or my food is antibiotic free, or my food is so-and-so free. But we never really consider how about the soil that food is actually being grown in, because even if it's organic, if the soil we're growing in it is a bad quality of soil.
Well, generally, in order for a food to have that organic label on it, it has to go through about a 7-year process, I believe, from being a conventional farm to an organic farm, and receive that label, that certification. And they also have to pay large amounts of money to have that credibility due to the prices that they can then sell it for. So these are things to keep in mind. So, when it comes to soil quality, there are a few main points that we have to focus on, which are primarily the organic matter content, biological activity, acidity, salinity, microbial activity, diversity, enzymatic activity. So basically we're looking at, is your soil alive?
Right.
Is the soil alive, or is the soil dead? I mean, we could take all of those things and apply it to human beings. more in the content of like good microbes versus bad microbes.
Yep.
But those are just some of the same concepts, okay?
Sorry, like when we talk about water, we have water that's dead water, alive water, structured water. So now we're actually going to consider the soil itself.
Yep.
All right, so functions.
Yeah.
What's soil for?
I want to talk specifically for a second here.
Yeah.
Why is soil quality important? That's one thing I want to go over really quickly. So, soil quality has a lot to do with the amount of water it can hold. Okay, so I got a little point here. The reason soil quality matters is healthy soil can store and process more water. There's actually a slide in this presentation we're going to see at the end. Poor quality soil is depleted, it won't hold water, therefore it can't hold nutrients, can't hold organic material, and all the water runs out, the soil dries out, and you don't have plants. So, there's a documentary that I've listed there for you guys, and it really talks about how they aerate the soil or how they, basically till the soil. Right. So if you look at the old school videos, they're tilling the soil with these massive plows that dig these trenches in the soil. And what it does is it releases all this moisture. When you release the moisture, the wonderful, healthy soil turns into basically dirt. And dirt is not really growable versus like topsoil, right?
Absolutely.
So these are concepts we have to keep in mind. And so there's actually a lot of new tilling machines that are coming out where they don't till the soil at all. They cut a sliver. So imagine you have grass, right? You're cutting a sliver in the soil and depositing seeds without really opening up the soil. And so everything stays closed, the seed is in there. Meanwhile, before they till the soil, there's massive trench, throw all the seeds in and then throw the soil back down.
So sorry, Jay, it sounds like the new process is maybe a little more time consuming and maybe that's why they till the old-fashioned way?
It's no, not necessarily. Really? I don't think they really knew the difference.
Okay, that's a good point.
So when you look at some of these, there was a documentary I was watching, I was speaking about it, and some of the research I've done, all of the greatest civilizations, Rome, Egypt, that housed, who knows, hundreds of thousands of people.
Yes.
They're deserts now.
Right.
That was one of the things that they brought up. So
Yep.
what we're seeing now in the Midwest, Central United States, where there's tons of farming, is that they're losing topsoil. It's turning into desert. It's turning into sand because we're losing so much moisture of the topsoil. And our topsoil on our planet is not regenerating at the same rate that we're depleting it. So these are why these concepts are so important. Right. This is why where you put your money in terms of organic farms versus conventional farms, like you have power with your buying power into what does well and what doesn't do well. Are Absolutely. You going to mainstream grocery stores? Or are you buying from the smaller guys? Like those are things we have to keep in mind.
Makes a big
right?
difference.
Shop local. It's always a big thing for me.
Yeah. I want to, just before I go on, a couple of did you knows here, some stuff when we were doing the research, that a spoonful of soil contains more microorganisms than there are people on the earth.
Yeah, crazy.
That's incredible.
Crazy.
And then many of these microorganisms are key indicators of the soil quality. So obviously, as you spoke about the quality itself. And then another cool one here, that virtually all fresh water falls on soils and travels over them, percolates through them, evaporates from them, is stored in them, or interacts with them to drive several chemical, physical, and biological processes.
That's
incredible.
Right?
It is a lot, absolutely.
So functions of soil, pretty basic. Maintain basic resources for food production, soil, clean water, and stable climate. Makes a lot of sense there. Supports plant growth.
Yeah.
Higher life force from better soil produces better food. So, I have a slide on that. And that's really, when we talk about life force, we are light beings. So some of you may seen the fact that I have a GDV camera. Gas discharge visualization, also known as Kirlian photography.
Yep.
European technology, and so they've done Kirlian photography on conventional versus organic produce, and I have a photo that I'll show you guys. So that's what we're referring to in terms of life force, and the real difference with our view on nutrition is it's not just about the biochemistry. So if we use the concept of water, for example, reverse osmosis water is technically dead water because it's been stripped of all micronutrients. But then there's systems that do what? They put back in minerals and cell salts and things like that.
Yes.
But does that water have the same life force as something like structured water, which goes through a water structure or is ionized or is moving through a fast-moving river? Because water is imprinted, right? That's what we have to understand. We are imprinted beings. And using the research from Dr. Emoto, that's what we know. We can change the quality of water based off of how we speak to that. So what is being spoken to the water that we're drinking? What's being spoken to our food as we eat it, or the soil? So these are things to keep in mind. What else do we have here? Recycle dead material, regulate and filter water flows. That makes sense.
Absolutely.
Supports buildings and roads, habitat for many plants and animals. Okay, pretty simple there. So here we have quality of soil effects on microorganism function. Liquefy minerals and convert non-organic compounds into organic compounds for plants. Makes sense.
Absolutely.
Produce amino acids, organic acids, and nutrients, right? So the healthier the soil is, the more micronutrients in the soil, the more we're gonna get out of that soil and into the plant. So when they were looking at micronutrient values in conventional food versus organic food, there was a very vast difference. And you can do a simple Google search and find these type of studies and research to show those differences.
Absolutely,
Okay?
absolutely.
Soil microbes produce numbers of vitamins. 1 gram of heavy soil contains some 600 million microorganisms and 10,000 plus different species of bacteria and fungi. And that's what you had just said.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, those are some really great numbers. That's fantastic.
Well, soil is living, dirt is living. And so when we have to understand, you know, maybe not today as much, but definitely in the past, those who grew up in farming communities were big and strong. You know, I remember when I was in high school, we got beat up by some farm boys in football pretty regularly.
We talk a lot about farm boys, their growth, how they moved as well, and so on. That's a very good point that you bring up. Absolutely, much bigger boys.
What else do we have here? Breaks down organic material in soil as well as complex minerals, making them available to the plants. Makes sense. 40 to 80% of bacteria in the plant's rhizosphere produce vitamins. Everything you can find in a human today is found in the rhizosphere. So basically, you know, we're looking at all the micronutrition that humans need is within the soil. So if we are not taking care of our topsoil, then we're really not taking care of our food source, which in turn is going to affect with us directly, right? Which is why when I have someone that's sick, the simplest change is getting them onto all organic food.
Yes.
And, you know, and then they can tell me it's expensive, but is it really expensive when you're paying the money you have to pay in protocols to like try to clean up your gut,
sickness,
or
doctors.
paying in sickness and emotions and time and everything else. You know what I'm saying?
I think these days we're in a society where we're always looking for the quick release, the quick solution, and the quick answer all the time. And we keep thinking that if it's quick, it's short, it's less expensive because the real stuff seems more expensive up front. But it's like being front loaded. You pay more now to stay healthy per se, but down the line, maintaining your body health is far cheaper than anything else. And I'm glad we're bringing this up because like water, we don't look at water in terms of it being structured. We think it comes out of a tap, it's water, you should drink it. Soil, most of us would think soil is soil. As long as the food's organic, it's okay. But now we're starting to see how important the soil and the quality of the soil is.
Well, I think you guys are here because you understand that not everything we are led to believe is the truth.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Not everything should be taken for what it's given on the surface.
Yep.
And things that were told to be safe were not safe. Yep. So I think, you know, as we know, history repeats itself. That's why we're here, and these are the things that we're learning. So you take things with a grain of salt, you do your own research, and, you know, my research has been the hundreds of people that I've worked with, you know, I would say thousands of protocols that I've created. You know, all of these factors that come in together.
Absolutely.
So why is soil quality important? We kind of talked about that. Healthy soil can store water. We went over this. Soil affects our gut, brain, lymphatic system, and ECM, right? Organically grown plants appear to have the a higher quality and higher bioavailability in relation to our gut. So that makes sense. The key of healthy, high-quality soil is the organic material and living organisms. And these living organisms create the cofactors, the vitamins, the minerals, and nutrients needed for cellular function. And that's why it's important, okay?
Well, just the fact we say microbiome, and of course at this point through all the modules, microbiome is an important word, something we understand for the gut. So the minute I see that and it starts to connect the gut and I start to realize, if nothing else, how soil quality really, really does matter.
Yep.
All right, next.
All right, so we just have a little infographic here. You know, this is something Kennedy spoke on. You know, 1 teaspoon of soil contains 10,000 different microorganisms. That's a lot.
Wow, it's incredible.
Soil microbes are the engine for cycling major nutrients. They detoxify pollutants and regulate soil-borne diseases of plants and animals. So, you know, it comes down to, like, if you want healthy plants, you need healthy soil. Pretty simple. You want a healthy human being? You need healthy food. Healthy food comes from healthy soil. Right? You tie the animals into that. What are the animals eating? What are the animals grazing on? What are the animals drinking? You know, these are all things that we have to talk about. So we'll talk about grass-fed, grain-fed, things like that as we continue.
Absolutely.
Okay. Soil biodiversity. So we have here decline in the diversity of it's the same thing, right? Basically, as we lose soil quality, as we lose the diversity in our soil, we're seeing the loss of diversity in the bacteria in our microbiome.
Yeah.
You know, there are I don't want to say populations, it's not really quite the word genus there, but there are certain species of bacteria that were in older versions of humans that we don't even see today. The diversity that we did have in terms of bacteria in our microbiome has considerably shrunk and does not offer what we need in the system in order to combat the idea of chronic disease and chronic pain that we're seeing today.
You know, when you say shrunk, didn't we, I thought I read something that when we say shrunk, we're talking like a massive difference.
Yeah, we're talking like maybe like 60 to 70% shrunk.
Right.
Like it's a huge number.
Big
and you know, don't quote me on that, but I do know it's a very big number that we're seeing in terms of the diversity lost in the innate microbiome of humans.
Yeah. Now, I just want to point something out. They'll see this in the slide. Soil hosts approximately a quarter of our planet's biodiversity. Why that's important, you mentioned it earlier. More land being bought, less farmers are farming. Maybe because farmers are selling the land to builders who are now paying big money for land. There are others who are buying the land just to preserve it for other reasons or to use it for other things. But that's an important stat there because that means as time is going on, if we're having less soil or less good quality soil, then that's going to have a massive effect on our population, as it already has from a biochemical perspective or more microbiome and so on. So we want to look deeper into this. It's far more than just a soil itself. It's really the effects on the human system.
Yep.
It's incredible.
I would agree. Damaged soil?
Yep.
Oh, wait. Oh.
Poor
What
quality
causes soil? Yeah, yeah.
So droughts, we know, is one of those big causes.
I mean, we've seen droughts in the Midwest, overgrazing. This is more of an animal thing. Poor tillage methods. That's what we just talked about. Are we tilling the soil and creating these huge trenches?
Yep.
Or are we really trying to preserve the moisture within the soil? Right. We do know it can be fairly dry in the Midwest.
Yep.
And then so it's fairly dry, and then they have like all the tornadoes and hurricanes and things like that. So when you don't have topsoil, what happens? All of it washes away.
That's exactly
and
what
you're
happens.
left with dirt and sand. So that in turn affects our food sourcing and everything else.
Yeah.
Right? Deforestation, pesticides, like these are all ideas that are pretty, I think that we're pretty aware of.
Pretty common, pretty aware.
And why we have the soil issues that we're currently having. Okay?
Now, there's a stat on here that says 68% of Ukraine's land, they were talking about, I'm not sure the pronunciation is, Chernozem is the term that they use for it.
Yep.
Dark, real, rich soil. And the only reason I'm bringing that up is because it seems like Europe always tends to be on the more organic.
Better side?
Well, I mean,
well,
yes.
they've made a lot of pesticides illegal. Like illegally, they're not allowed to use those things. North America has a very different idea when it comes to their farming and agricultural methods. Meanwhile, the other side of the world is very different. I mean, that's the, well, I don't know if that's the primary reason. It's probably one of the reasons why a lot of my celiac clients, I use celiac with air quotes because these celiac clients can go over to Europe and eat gluten. So I don't really understand how that's possible if they actually are truly celiac. Well, if we have GMO gluten over here and they're having issues with the glyphosate more so than the gluten, well then that's why they could eat over there and not have issues.
Yes, and I've experienced that myself eating cheese from Europe compared to eating cheese from here, and yet one really bothers me and one doesn't really bother me at all.
I have Europeans that come over here and I do testing with the EAV and gluten and lactose are in the green. I'm like, oh wow, you're lucky. They're like, yeah, not here though. I'm like, why? They're like, because I can't eat it. It bothers me if I eat it. So these are ideas that we have to be aware of.
Absolutely.
And where our food is coming from. It makes a huge difference. Food is not the same. Not in any capacity of the word.
Okay. And I want to just tie in one last thing, Jay. Soil erosion, talking about poor land management, we kind of touched on that. Climate change. And again, the only reason I bring up climate change is we speak about the human system on how everything is interconnected and there's a root cause. One system affects another because systems don't work on their own. Here's another great example when it comes to Mother Nature. Climate change for anyone who thinks it's not important, well, if climate change is affecting the soil and our soil quality affects the kind of food we have, and the kind of food we eat is going to affect our microbiome, which is gut, and we speak about how the gut seems to be the center of everything.
Yep.
Autoimmune diseases, 99% of them being told to come from the gut and microbiome.
Well, pretty much every
yes.
condition known to man has been tied back to the microbiome within the last decade.
You know, I'm saying 99.9 because
who knows?
Because we never know. But my point is, if you don't believe climate change is valuable, now maybe there's a reason to say, wow, climate change is a lot more effect than I thought it did.
Yeah, and when you do, I was looking at this some other research, and they were talking about how, grass actually pulls in large amounts of CO2. And so when you have grass-fed beef eating large amounts of grass,
Yep.
well, then you're pulling in more CO2 than just the tree aspect of it.
Absolutely.
But a lot of the people pushing, political agendas, pushing climate change, talk about how beef is a big cause of global warming because of all the methane and whatever.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, if they're producing methane because they're eating grain, of course it's going to cause issues. I mean, the human beings that eat tons of grain, I can't say support the health of our planet.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely.
Meanwhile, those that are looking at things more grass-fed than healthier options have a very different mechanism in that, right? The people that are eating grain-fed products, they just don't know better. And the bowels of grain-fed humans aren't exactly the best either. So when you have this natural ecosystem of animals eating grass like they're supposed to, fertilizing the soil by pooping as they normally do, then we have this natural ecosystem. But when we break the ecosystem, we start to create issues. And those are ideas that we'll get into, things like permaculture, things like biodynamic farming, different farming ideas where like literally the entire system is self-sufficient and can rebuild an ecosystem like it's supposed to. And this is how we got here. These are old practices that we've just forgotten over time.
You bet. And if you do hear and read, and I just want to make it clear that cows produce methane, and because there's so many cows, this is destroying the world, because I have read stats to say they produce more methane than all the cars. Now, also keep something in mind. That's because we eat a lot more beef than we should. We're eating 12-ounce steaks.
People eat way more than we need to.
Right. So my point to that is, if we ate red meat the way we're supposed to, we wouldn't have to have as many
I would say
cows.
in a day, I probably eat average 8 to 12 ounces of meat in a day. Like, I don't go crazy with it, and that's generous if I have like.
But what kinds of meat?
Well, it's all grass-fed meat.
And it's also organ.
Grass-fed, grass-finished, organ meat, different types of meat, game meat. It's not just beef that I'm eating. Good quality. Like I eat all sorts. I'm supporting the entire ecosystem, in that way. And I'm also supporting my body in terms of different varieties of meat, not eating the same thing all the time, which is important.
Beef, chicken, beef, chicken, beef, chicken.
Beef, chicken, turkey.
So,
the fitness
and even
community.
turkey, and then now we know how organs and other things, and tilapia. It's always the same three things. But nevertheless, let's just touch on some damaged soil. And
damaged soil, loss of vitality, increased drug use, increased disease. This is what happens when we have damaged soil. This is where we're currently at, Guys, COVID, we are literally shutting down the world because of a virus that has a 99% survival rate.
Yeah, and I'm going to point to the vitality part, because we speak a lot about energy and vitality and intention in terms of what's put into things and who's doing it all. So I think that's a really, really, really important one. And I know when we first started talking about soil, I hadn't done as much research on soil. I was familiar with food and why food was good. But this sort of started to scare me, because now and this is why sometimes knowing less is better, knowing where food will come from.
Having your eyes closed, that one?
Well, sometimes it's better not to be aware, because once something has been opened, Pandora's box, you can't close it. And understanding how important soil really is in everything that I'm eating and drinking, and how it all ties in together.
Well, it's like, you can buy organic food from the grocery store, but I will try to go the extra mile and figure out where I can get organic food, farm-raised meat.
Yes.
Like, I will go the extra step to try to shop local and support the communities that are supporting me and my health, and not necessarily just these big chain stores all the time, in an effort to try to preserve the future, to be honest.
Absolutely.
You know, and keep in mind that this is like, you know, we're specifically talking about soil and methane and things like that, and that's a real like meat conversation in terms of arguments. So that's why we're bringing that up.
Running out of farmland.
Yeah, we're running out of farmland. And why we run out of farmland? Well, you know, money, real estate, running out of soil, like quality soil. Like these are all things that we're talking about. There is a push, Living Soil, the documentary. There is a push from advocates to try to teach conventional farmers how to rebuild their soil. But of course, there's pushback because it's more expensive, there's less profits, blah, 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 blah. The system, right? Supposedly, we can have potentially 10 billion people on this planet by 2030.
That's what they're saying.
That's a scary, scary number. 10 billion people.
That is quite a bit. And, you know, now it starts to just work backwards and think, running out of farmland, 10 billion people, food has to be grown somewhere. Are we going to be growing food?
Well, China's growing it in shipping containers, in office buildings. Hydroponics is becoming more and more a thing. And it's, you know, what is the potential effects of hydroponic farming? Like, does it have the same micronutrient value? Okay, maybe it does. Does it have the same life force value?
That was going to be my next question. The vitality, the life force.
These are interesting things we have to keep in mind, right?
Yes.
The American family depletes 7,000 acres of land every 100 years.
That's exactly why we're going to run out of land. When we have 300 plus million people in the United States right now, and we think about
7,000 acres.
Wow, it's just mind-boggling.
That's insane. I don't even think I have issues with that statement because the average American family doesn't even eat real food. So,
God knows where these stats do come from, but something to keep in mind. I think the more important thing to take home from this is that we are depleting the acreages of land on some level, and less land to farm on, the more land we use up for whatever reasons, the more problem we're going to run into. So yeah, running out of farmland is definitely a scary thought.
So, you know, I have a little piece here about damaged soil. So sufficient organic matter in healthy soil, right? Definitely has more ion exchange, water retention, microbial diversity is high. But it's because they're low in herbicides, pesticides, and fertilizers, right? Meanwhile, low organic material, the other side, is low in water retention, low in microbial diversity, but higher in herbicide, pesticides, and fertilizers. And that, of course, will affect the micronutrient value of the food. Right?
Absolutely.
Organic fruit versus conventional fruit always tastes different. And if you can't taste the difference, I suggest becoming a little bit more aware and focusing on bringing that energy into the system.
And energy, again, is extremely important. Remember, everything is energy.
A lot of people are disillusioned in a way, right? They let their ego tell them something to the point that it's of a belief system, to the point that they're not actually in tune with their senses to pick up on what's happening.
And it's programming. It's not.
And we can use the vegan example as one of those things.
That's
vegan,
programming.
Vegetarian, carnivore, like whatever the idea is, right?
So, sorry, let me interrupt. I have a client that will say to me, "I'm going to go vegan because vegan's the way to go," and I'll say, "Why?"
Yeah, why?
And they'll
Who
say,
told you that?
Well, I saw it on TV. I heard it on Instagram.
You heard it on the brainwashing thing?
So what exactly? So what starts to happen? And we're not suggesting don't eat vegan or don't eat this.
It's relative.
But it's relative. But just consider the whys.
It's relative to where you are in the world. It's relative to can your environment support you in that diet. It's relative to what's going on with your microbiology, your food sensitivities. It's relative to your health goals. Maybe I wanted to take a month and just be a vegan to give my gut a break from meat.
Absolutely. And I've done it, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Fantastic.
It's great.
I probably do it during the summer. Not
and
during
you
the
mentioned
winter.
in Barbados you find a lot
when
more...
I'm in the Caribbean, I want, fruit, vegetables, maybe a little bit of fish, but I'm good on light things. I feel great because it's so hot already. The last thing I want is meat.
Heavy meats
to be honest with you. When I'm here, I'm cold. I don't got a lot of body fat.
We want meat.
I want meat. That's just what I feel great on. My bowels feel great. I feel great. I'm not hungry all the time. But if I'm eating fruit and vegetables here, I'm hungry all the time. I don't feel satisfied.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so that,
satiated.
whether you want to call that intuition or what, but obviously there's something going on.
Absolutely.
Okay, heavy
Right.
metals in soil.
Now, the reason I like this slide in this particular section you just chat on, here's how I want you to take direction on this one. Yes, heavy metals enter soils through whether it's the weathering of rocks or how they till it. I get that, and we can touch on this. But I hear heavy metals, and what a lot of people don't consider is how are these heavy metals affecting us? What organs are they affecting? So let's chat on this a little. We don't want to go too much into depth because we do talk a lot about heavy metals in other modules, of course. But I hear heavy metals, I think liver, and I think, oh my God, so what if I'm eating all this food or all these heavy metals?
You got to think liver, you got to think kidney, you got to think methylation, like the list goes on and on. But let's go. Soils that contain substances such as heavy metals can be toxic to humans, right? I've heard of people basically getting heavy metal poisoning from juicing too much kale and spinach and things like that. We've heard that.
Good point to bring up, absolutely.
Even in California now, there's radiation in the soil, like they're finding radioactive heavy metals in people, like, we got to be aware of these things. Okay, soils are important for human health in a number of ways. Approximately 78% of the average per capita consume crops grown directly in soil. Another 20% is from food sources that are related indirectly to soil. So that means about most 80% of people are eating food that comes out of soil, and the other 20% is coming from other sources, possibly things like water irrigation systems,
right,
so on and so forth.
Yep.
Okay, exposure to heavy metals through soil is a huge human concern. Arsenic, brown rice. Arsenic is big in brown rice. Okay.
Absolutely, to consider that. Even if it's organic.
Even if it's organic.
Just to make that.
Commonly grouped in with heavy metals. The heavy metal, and I see that because a lot of the guys, when I see arsenic in people, I'm like, do you eat a lot of brown rice? They're like, yep. Right? Those are things we got to be aware of. The heavy metals of greatest concerns for humans are cadmium, copper, mercury, arsenic. Those are some big ones we got to be aware of. Heavy metals enter the soil naturally through weathering rocks. You talked about that. Human activity. Okay. We got to think about mining ores. Think about different types of like household waste, industrial waste, sewage, sludge, wastewater, like e-waste. Like, oh my gosh, the list
automobile
goes
exhaust,
on.
coal burning, erosion of metal structures,
the list
fertilizers,
goes on and
manures,
on. These
pesticides.
are all things we have to become aware of. Okay. Urban soils are particularly susceptible to significant amounts of heavy metals from automobile exhaust, coal burning, metal structures. You talked about that.
Yep.
In agricultural use, fertilizers, manures, pesticides have led to the accumulation of heavy metals in soils. Right, good.
Heavy metals disrupt enzymatic activities commonly affecting the brain and the kidneys, which you mentioned earlier. So again, our other modules go into those sort of things.
In more detail.
Always remember how important soil really is. And I like I said, I don't think I ever really looked at soil or farming the same way.
It was that one document there, the what was it? Under the Veil, Deception.
Yes.
Under the Veil. So the Paul Check video, the Paul Check ebook, essentially,
which is a great
it's about
one.
138 pages.
Yeah.
And I just suggest you read it once, because once you read it once, you kind of know.
Conceptually, you just need to have to understand, and you have to be an expert in it.
You need to have an understanding to know that your money in buying food is beyond you. We just think about things for us. It's beyond you. The choice of where you buy your food is beyond you. It goes back to who's the farmer you're supporting. What type of farming practices do they have? That's where you're putting your money. Where you put your money is a direct reflection of your grander idea for the earth and the future of the earth, and therefore your home.
Absolutely.
Right? These are things we have to keep in mind.
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay.
And just, I think you mentioned it, but from a clinical perspective, you mentioned sometimes a client will come in, you'll speak to them, they tell you they eat all of this organic food, or they're buying food because it's natural. And let's say it isn't organic, let's say they have a budget, and they wonder why they eat 10 pieces of steak a day. If all these things are coming from foods that were produced in these types of soils, we could have heavy metals in our system, even though we're not eating junk food or even drinking.
Most people do have heavy metals.
Right, and it all comes just from their natural
I mean,
foods.
we are already aware of, like, I think I've talked about this already.
Yes.
Tony Robbins had mercury poisoning from all the sushi that he was eating. Right, because there's mercury in our water, and salmon are big fish, and they collect the heavy metal deposits from all the other smaller fish. So is the idea to not eat sushi? No, the idea is to manage our detox organs. The idea is to manage our detox pathways that affect heavy metals.
Right.
Our responsibility is to manage our microbiome so that our body can get the stuff out as it's supposed to. Our job is to assess and understand where our health is at in relation to where we want to be and where we're going.
Because the soil might be bad, the air might not be great, I'm going to have to come across these things. One of the examples I love using is, people say, well, how do I change everything? Oh my God, I live in this world. I go, look, I can't change what's around me, but we can change the water by buying certain machines, which we've done.
Well, water,
air
food,
quality,
air
food
quality,
right?
yeah.
Little
What we
things.
put on our skin. Like we have 100% choice over what affects us in this world.
Absolutely.
Through what we do to protect ourselves. If you do nothing to protect yourself, well then you got nothing there for you.
Okay.
I don't know what to tell you.
Biodynamic farming on this little topic.
Yeah, I mean, we don't really need to go over this too much. Biodynamic farming is a type of farming, one that is very useful and powerful in the idea of this like life cycle. So essentially, all the way from animal to soil, the whole entire system supports the whole system to the point that we don't really have to be bringing in external things to feed the system, hence the word biodynamic farming. I have a friend, his name is Paul Bourne down in Barbados. He created a biodynamic farm, and essentially every animal within the farm kind of supports other animals within the farm. So the farming system is almost supporting itself, where he doesn't really have to bring in external things to support the system.
So within its own system itself. So that's biodynamic.
Yep.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Interesting. Good.
Okay. We talked about, oh no, we didn't talk about this. Did you know for a 1% increase in organic matter in U.S. cropland, it could store the amount of water that flows over the Niagara Falls in 150 days? Can you even conceptualize that number?
That's what I'm trying to say. You have to really think about this for a sec. For each 1% increase in organic matter, U.S. cropland could store the amount of water that overflows in Niagara in 100. One day would have been impressive.
The things that I've seen, you know, I'm not really like a doomsday type of guy, but I do enjoy people like with their doomsday setups. And like, you know, with what, 500 to 1,000 square feet of like greenhouse space. Do you know how much food you can grow?
Tons.
What's his name?
Who are we talking?
Runner. Bill.
Oh, yes.
Bill and Vesna.
Yes.
They have a
Yes.
20,
Yes.
they have a 365
Yes.
garden going.
Yes. Bill the Hogue, we're just going to say hi to Bill because he
He's
does.
probably watching this.
He will watch this.
You know, they got a home garden. They set it up this summer. You know, they were showing me the photos. And middle of winter, snowstorm, things are still growing.
He shows me how everything's growing. They grow it at home, which is fantastic.
They grow it at home. They get their own fruits and veggies, you know. Then you have your local farm guy that you get your meat from. And like, really, what else do you need at that point in time? You know, you're kind of self-sufficient. And they're in this like little space and they get enough food to feed themselves perfectly.
Absolutely do.
You know?
They have not been brainwashed.
So, all right, let's move into food quality.
All right. So
Okay.
what we call high quality food, I don't know, local, organic, you've mentioned these. If it's local, I know when I lived in Kitchener, Ontario, we always used to go up to the farms to buy stuff. It was very local. We wanted to support them.
Yep.
It wasn't always organic, but because of how it was grown and how everything, the intention
So again,
and vitality.
they don't always have the organic label.
They never had the organic
They don't
label.
always have the organic label.
Yes.
But so the company that I was using in Burlington, Mama Earth, you
Right.
know, they wouldn't always have organic farms for things, but they would use local, and local were basically people who necessarily they were in the process of, you know, getting that organic certification, which we did mention takes 7 years.
Takes many years, yeah.
And it's also very expensive.
Very
And
expensive.
some of the smaller farmers can't afford that. So I'm down to support a local farmer.
So
in the
local
process.
farmers are probably using a lot of the qualities of what someone who calls them organic is,
Yep.
but they can't
They're not
actually
there yet.
say organic
They're not there
because
yet. And I
either they
mean-
can't get there or it's too expensive.
And you could very easily do your research. Mama Earth Organics did list where these things were coming from, and I could have easily looked into the farm and gone and talked to them and asked what were their practices were, right, and see how they did things. Okay.
Okay, so bioavailability, obviously.
Bioavailability. I mean, that's pretty simple. Like, this is like how bioavailable is the food that you are eating? How available are the micronutrients in that food to suffice you, to help you grow, to help you heal, you know? And more importantly, what is the life force of that food giving us. So that's our idea of bioavailability.
So bioavailability then simply will say that I might eat something I think is really good for me, but if I get nothing from it, that's really what we're saying. There are foods that really, well then, and I'm pausing because, so what we're saying is we have food that we actually eat, we get nothing from. It's just...
Totally, Doritos.
We're just chewing it and spitting it out, really. And food.
100 bars, although I do like 100 bars. You know, so yeah, there is definitely food that does not offer any micronutrition to us. So we have to consider this, you know, energy in versus energy out. I use that all the time, right? Most people be like, oh, that food was so good, I have the itis. Okay, if you have the itis, what's happening there? Literally, you ate either so much food or so much garbage food that your body is pulling so much energy from you to digest that bolus that you need to take a nap or lay down.
Yeah, that's not normal.
That is the complete opposite of why we eat.
Yes, it's supposed to bring the energy in.
It's supposed to be energy in so that we can have energy and function. Like, does food bring us energy or does it pull us down? Yeah. These are ideas we have to be aware of, okay? Chemical free. So I got a little link there for the EWG. That is the organization that basically creates, as you can see there, the dirty 12 and the clean 15.
Okay, good.
So that changes every single year. So if you click on that link, you can get the 2020 version. I do believe the 2021 version is coming out shortly, so stay updated for that.
Okay. Fresh, food that's fresh.
Fresh, you know, like so many of my clients, I'm like, how much food do you eat that goes bad in 5 to 7 days? And they kind of look at me and pause. And it's like, you should know that answer because technically if you were eating food that goes bad, you'd be doing groceries like twice a week.
Yep.
Because you would need to, because food's gone bad, because it's fresh. Otherwise, you're eating food that's obviously got all sorts of things in it to keep it ripe.
So I was just gonna, I made a note here.
Yes.
Where is it coming from?
Right.
So you keep saying local. If I buy an avocado that comes from Mexico and you go to the store and you look at it and go, wow, it looks great and refreshing. I go, well, if it's been sitting on trucks when they actually took it down, how long did it take to get up here?
Well,
how does it stay like
this? This is part of the idea of food rotation, right? And eating based off of the season. So this is where when you use Mama Earth Organics, for example, and they're pulling from local farmers, you're only getting fruit or vegetables that are local to the season because they can't grow otherwise. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So that in of itself means that it's very difficult to develop food intolerances because you're not eating the same thing all year round. You're rotating your diet based off of the season. And these things are important.
Jason, I remember this, and I'll tell you, even our videographer who's always recording here, I remember there was a time when I used to get excited about peach season because I love peaches, and you couldn't get them all year round.
Totally.
I can get peaches anytime I like. If you really think about it, I can get anything.
Go to
which we're going to go into food intolerances, and this kind of leads to how some of those intolerances happen. All right. Anything else do we want to say about food quality?
Pretty.
A
lot of grocery stores make the food look pretty.
Which is what I kind of just was touching on.
They have literally lights that change. Like, I don't know who I heard this from, but grocery stores have different lights in the sections to enhance the color of the fruit and vegetables. Like, they do that on purpose.
You click on your next slide. I don't know if you remember, we popped this in here, the Kirlian photography.
Okay, so here's our Kirlian photography, right?
Fantastic.
So this is the idea that really makes it, call it quantum in that way. We are light beings, right? We are mainly light beings. And so Kirlian photography is one of the ways, or the GDV camera as I talked about, that we can assess our light system. And you can see here the differences between our organic and conventional fruit, vegetables?
Fruit right here, we've got kiwi, we've got apples, we've got mushrooms, yes, absolutely.
And so you can really see some of the difference between the fruit and the vegetables in terms of the light energy coming from it. And that in turn will directly affect our life force. I can't say I've ever had someone switch to organic food and tell me that they feel crappier.
Well, if they did, then there's something else going on.
Definitely, but I'm telling you, I've never had that.
Yes, I can't imagine.
I had one girl one time, an old friend actually. She was my age. She had fibromyalgia, or was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. Was on chronic narcotic pain medication and everything else. You know what we did? Switched to organic food, dude. Honestly, within like 3 months, it all went away.
Really fibromyalgia.
It's like it all went away. I mean, we had some parasites and like little things we had to clean up with her gut. But like it was primarily for her food source. Remember, people are sick. You are sick because of your internal and your external environment. Those are the two environments that make you sick. In the external environment, we went over a lot of these things in exogenous load already.
Absolutely.
Right? What we're talking about now, and we talked about water already too, so what we're talking about now is the food and how important the food is. And, you know, for any of you that have been sick and everything like that, I know the frustration you've had and experienced when you've gone to your doctor and they tell you that there's no diet change you can make to help you.
Yeah, that's unfortunate because there's absolutely life.
I had a client with MS and his specialist is like, oh, don't worry about the food. You know, here's this medication. It's all you need. And like we know direct, like me and him have been working together for so long. We can clearly see that when his falls off in his diet, all his symptomology comes back up and we got to clean it up. So yes, diet has a huge role in that. And we have more research that I'm going to give you. So
I have a client who I taught many years ago who had MS.
Right.
And she had the same story. She went to conventional doctors, unfortunately. Right. But she discovered herself, without any help from anybody, that when she was on the right type of diet, and controlled her stress, of course, that she had no symptoms from MS. In fact, Jason, I met this girl 15 years ago, and in the last, I spoke to her about a year and a half ago. For the last 12 years, she's had no issues. And she says the only time she does,
run to food.
Once something changes in her food or her stress, but it is very manageable. And yet, when I was young and someone said they had multiple sclerosis, it was sure death. There was nothing you could do about it.
You're just gonna die.
And now,
look at all our options.
Yeah, makes a big difference. So this is great. I hope that you guys spend some time and look at this in terms of the energy with food and stuff, because as Jay said, everything is energy. All right, food impacting health. Too much food, too little food, nutrition dense, and then let's talk nutrition deficient food. Let's talk about too much food.
I mean, yeah, like too much food. Do we really need as much food as we generally eat?
No, I think I used to eat a lot because it was based on my ego had something to do with that. Boredom, ego, because I had to have more muscle and more size, and I thought it made me stronger. And then I realized, even though I thought I was eating great food, if the food had all these chemicals in it, well, if I ate it 6 times more
like
per
our
day,
idea that we need all this food is a fallacy.
It is.
You know, I mean, like I cannot, like conceptually, can you even possibly believe that prior generations ate as much food as we ate based off of their farming practices? Like it's impossible.
No.
It doesn't make any sense.
No.
You know how many animals you'd have to kill to eat the amount of food that most people eat these days? Like it's insane. It just doesn't make sense. So too much food, too much strain on our digestive system. The gallbladder is supposed to only really hold enough bile for 2 meals in a day, right? So that's why we have the storage sac. It stores bile for our 2 meals. Whenever we eat, boom, we have bile, digest our fats, away we go. When you start eating more than that, you start to have issues. So this is why the idea and rise of intermittent fasting and all these things have become so important.
Makes sense.
And make a lot of sense because here we are in a space where people are feeling that much better when they're eating less food. There's less inflammation on the system. And as long as we're eating micronutrient dense foods and supplying, supplementing our lifestyle with what's necessary relative to the lifestyle that we live, right? That's being key. We tend to live pretty healthy, vital lives. And you know, a lot of people have gotten a lot better in following that, right?
When you started testing me 2 years ago, I know prior to that, I used to have my 6 or 7 meals a day. And I've never had my stomach, literally for probably 20 years, it never rested. Now that I look back, it was always eating and eating and eating, because there was no fasting, right? And then I thought that if you fasted, it was bad, it was too long, your stomach got hungry, you felt nauseous. But you know, something I started to realize is when the system operates the way it should, I mean, I have 2 or 3 good, solid meals a day, and I feel great. I don't feel hungry.
And they're not massive
No,
meals
they're
either.
not. And I don't crave sugar. We don't crave. I mean, look, we like to have a sweet. But it isn't because I'm craving the sweet, right? If it's not there, I'm not going to die for it. But there was a time, I will admit, where I used to tell myself I had a sweet tooth. Well,
it's called a sugar addiction.
that's exactly what it was.
Really, they're just bugs telling you to eat sugar.
And I was lucky because I was disciplined enough to stay away from it. But now I can really be very appreciative of people who say, "Oh my God, I crave sugar."
When I was at my sickest,
yes,
I almost every night I had to have something sweet. Like it was bad.
Yeah.
It was bad, and I was just like, I am going to go insane if I don't have something sweet.
Okay.
And I get
So
it.
we talked about too much food and
Too little
how that's-
food.
What's too little? Now,
Yeah, I
do you
mean-
find clients eat too little?
I feel like there are overweight clients that starve themselves, thinking
Because
that-
they think less is better.
Yes.
Okay.
And so when I start actually feeding them and giving them food, they start to lose weight. They're like, I don't understand what's going on. Well, I'm like, you've been in starvation mode for how long? Like, the body needs micronutrition, okay? And that goes in the same realm there as nutrient deficient food. You know how many
Absolutely.
people eat nutrient deficient food and the body perceives that as starvation because they're not getting any nutrients.
Yes, and I just want to touch on this. A lot of clients always ask me about food, I'm hungry, and I keep telling them that it's about how dense it is with nutrients
Totally.
that will satiate the body.
When I eat
So
organ meat, very
you're
little
fine.
amount do you need, and you feel full.
You feel very
when you
satiated.
eat like a bison sausage or a bison burger, or we had elk steak the other day. That stuff is so dense. You're like, I don't need a ton more of this. Like, it's full of my micronutrients and everything like that.
Yeah.
So when it comes to this idea in the fitness realm, is usually a big issue with the idea of too little food.
Right.
Because they're eating 900 calories in an effort to lose weight, and like that messes with their metabolic rate, and there's a whole another ball of worms there. But my main thing I want to communicate here is, as long as we're eating in a way that supports the microbiome and supports microbial health, good microbial health,
Yes.
then I'm not really opposed to how much a person eats.
Right, it's not
If
too
I
little,
have
not too
someone
much.
on a
Yeah.
keto diet, and my main focus is to heal their gut, then I'm like, eat as much as you want. Now, if this person tells me that they want a six-pack while trying to heal their gut, well, then we're going to have a conversation as to how much exactly they're eating. You can't eat 5,000 calories a day necessarily and think you're going to have a six-pack.
I asked you once, I had a client that I told you about recently, and we won't mention any names, but I mentioned that this particular person started to feel weaker during his first protocol. And he was very concerned, and she was also very concerned, because there's a guy and a girl. They were very concerned about their strength. And I said, well, you need to decide on what your goal is first.
And which we will talk about.
Is it right? Is it the health, or is it how strong you are? Because pound for pound, you may be stronger down the line, but today it has to be about your health first. And then they started to get the idea of, okay, it makes sense now.
Well, if you blow the engine out, the health of the system
Yes.
in an effort to have power, well, what's the benefit of that?
So, and I tried to explain my own experience. I said, inside first, and then we move our way outside, and then you can work on
clean
performance.
the engine and do your performance after.
Later. Good.
You can't tell me your performance is not going to improve after cleaning out the engine.
And that's what I said. I
That's
said,
impossible.
Pound for pound, you don't have to be as big, you will be much better. All right, food quality and microbiota.
Biota. New research has examined the effect of dietary quality on the composition of the colon's microbiota, which is microbiology.
Yep.
The study suggests that following a high-quality diet may increase the number of beneficial bacteria, whereas following a low-quality diet may raise that of harmful bacteria. Not really mind-blowing research, okay?
It isn't rocket
Pretty
science.
simple.
We know this already.
Organic versus conventional, right? Pretty simple. Lady Eve Balfour founded the organic movement in England in 1946, and that's why England and Europe is generally a lot better. I put in there the EWG link for you guys in relation to organic versus conventional foods. If you don't have money for conventional, again, we have the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen. Dirty Dozen ideally are organic. Clean 15 are the better ones that you can buy conventional with lower risk of pesticide use. 21-year study. The microorganism population responsible for soil fertility and delivering nutrients to the plant rose 85% higher in organically grown managed fields than non-organic. 85%.
Massive.
Can you
difference.
imagine feeling 85% better by just changing your food?
And one of the things we always talk about, it's the lifestyle
I think I gave that
changes.
example already. The
You did,
fibromyalgia.
yeah. Fibromyalgia. So it's really amazing how food obviously can do these incredible things.
Okay.
Okay, so type of diet. So let's quickly touch on, again, because we don't need to go into a lot of detail based on how we look at food and nutrition in terms of how it affects our systems. That's why we're very I call it almost like an open blanket. We don't really have a favorite. We don't say you should be a keto or you should do this, because we know that every
It's
person,
relative.
every situation, it's all relative to the person and where they are, because that might even change within their own path. as they move along.
Totally.
Okay, so don't want to get crazy on here. Performance, body composition, health and longevity. How do you decide what's your intention and what is your goal? Really, right? So let's talk about performance.
Well, let's just start with this. If you are in QHI, you're probably not a performance coach.
No, that's not our primary
You're
goal.
probably also not a body composition expert.
Probably not.
So, we're probably here because we're focused on health and longevity. Mind you, there are different diet types if you're focusing on performance and body composition. I mentioned them earlier.
Yes.
Precision nutrition is kind of the gold standard if you're looking at body composition and performance.
Yeah.
There are the holistic nutrition individuals
Yes.
that are kind of a blend between health and longevity and body composition.
Yep.
You know, kind of that blend of the two. But that's where you're really looking at macros, to be honest. You're looking at what are the macros, what are the calorie counts, what types of foods are put in there. There's the people who focus on macros only regardless of food quality. And then there's those who focus on macros in relation to food quality.
Correct.
So these are all things we have to keep in mind. I just have, what do you decide? How do you decide what's your intention, what's your goal? This is based off of your avatar, based off of your business, based off of who you want to work with. If you want to work with athletes, you should probably know something about macros. You know, in relation to when they're practicing versus when they have a game or a performance or things like that. Like, these are all things we have to keep in mind. Body composition, you know, that's a complex idea because there's a lot of people that can achieve body composition changes temporarily.
Yep.
That go right back. So the question is, why did it go right back? Well, that's now a health, longevity, systemic question, you know?
Now, Jay, let me interrupt you. I mean, and maybe it is or maybe it isn't, but I want to be clear to whoever we speak to here. I've always believed, and only because of my experience, but even with others, if I really look after my insides and my health and longevity first, don't I probably end up having a pretty decent body composition if I'm following where I don't eat too much? Like it's really hard. If I'm a normal person eating 2 or 3 times a day, watching my headspace, my emotions, like
I could agree with you. I could agree with you. But when people don't have more advanced testing, just you know what I mean? Like, just eating how you're saying may not get them
no,
there.
but I mean having the extra testing, having all these things. In other
Yeah,
words,
if we do the extra testing we're doing and they know their food intolerances and they know
That's
their
what I mean, yes.
micronutrient weaknesses,
Yes.
they understand about detox pathways, like if they
correct.
understand these concepts.
You're doing all that for me. You're doing all this. You're
Yeah.
giving me health and longevity. My composition should probably end up being pretty
decent. And if I am training in a way that is supportive of my biomechanical system and strength, then I will perform just fine.
And your performance will be, and performance is relative, guys, whether you want to be an athlete or a bodybuilder
100%.
or
But
run
like,
a marathon.
as an average human,
yes,
I think we will perform just fine.
Absolutely.
If you're trying to be, a power lifter, well, you know,
That's a whole different story.
Things are a little different, right?
But you shouldn't get up every morning and feel like you're exhausted all the time. You shouldn't have to have 25 hours of sleep. Oh
my lifestyle was driven on performance for being a bodybuilder, and it got me sick.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So,
absolutely.
you know, I am not built to be a bodybuilder. Look at me, you know?
I'm
built strong and I'm built fast. I was a sprinter. And I was, I was never a power lifter, but I was really, really strong. Where I could be a power lifter based on pound for pound.
Pound for pound, yep.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And even as I got bigger, I can't say I was stronger pound for pound.
No,
because my quality of tissue, my quality of health was not there.
I totally agree. I've been far, far, far heavier. Couldn't understand years ago how being 40 or 50 pounds heavier, all of a sudden you're 30 or 40 pounds lighter. You go, how come pound for pound I feel that much stronger?
Right.
And it makes you wonder. Let's finish off here. We've got a few more slides. Types of diet. We obviously are not recommending these diets in terms of you must eat this or must eat that. But I know that part of the protocol, when we're putting together protocols for clients, which we're going to talk protocols in our next module, but sometimes we have to make some of these recommendations. So it's good for people to understand what
people
they are.
definitely need to be eating the right type of food. So yeah, we absolutely are recommending a way of eating, but we're not. We're not
writing it out for them.
We're not a nutritionist.
No.
I'm not giving meal plans. No. If you would like to do that, that is a whole different program. As I said, precision nutrition, like they do that. But types of diets that people will come in with / are kind of popular right now.
Yeah.
Antifungal, keto, dirty keto, clean keto, paleo, autoimmune paleo, vegan, raw vegan, pescatarian, vegetarian, raw food, blood type diet, microbiome diet, low fat diet. You can add in there bulletproof diet, Mr. Asprey.
Yes.
Bulletproof is a big one. Like there's a few different types of diets out there.
Yep.
I mean, technically bulletproof is like this idea of lifestyle, kind of falls in with the keto sense. Like keto, Asprey kind of put his own spin on it. So, the main diets that I recommend to people are basically antifungal, keto, paleo, autoimmune paleo, and then obviously their direct food sensitivity.
Now you're
list.
using these to drive something. Like when you say
Totally.
to Kennedy, don't have an antifungal, not because I actually have to enjoy it, but what you're saying to me then is you've got fungus in order to get rid of it.
Yeah, so if I'm giving you the Kaufman diet, which is also called the antifungal diet, then it's because I have found fungal properties in the system, and we're trying to eat in a way that does not feed these things so that we can essentially create a system where they're not there. If I have a stray dog and I keep feeding that stray dog, it's never going to go away.
Absolutely.
Right? They are parasitic in nature in that we are the host and they live off of us. It's pretty common. It's not really uncommon.
I just want to be clear on when they're recommending diets, or when you do, it's not that you're telling people what to eat. You're saying antifungal because it's going to solve a problem. You're telling me to go on keto. So if I go on keto, I could go back to a different type of diet later.
Technically, the keto diet is the antifungal diet, but it's focused on high fat.
There you go.
That's all the real difference is. And so you as a practitioner need to understand with this person relative to their goals and what they're trying to do. You know what I'm saying?
That's what I
want
want
you
to be clear
of. A lot of people can't handle the high fat keto diet due to the state of their liver and gallbladder anyways. So I'm not attached to keto being high fat. Usually I tell people keto because I need to focus on the no sugar aspect.
That's the point I want to make clear.
The
as to
no
why
carbohydrates.
you're recommending the diets. Not from a perspective of keto because it makes you leaner. You're solving an issue with the diet. You're using it to direct something. That's what we want to be clear of. Okay.
It's all about, what is the purpose and intention from a microbiome point of view. I really only give dietary recommendations based off of the microbiome state. If I find that their microbiome is doing pretty good and they're healthy, I usually recommend a paleo diet. Eat things that like fly, swim, run,
yes,
you know what I mean? They're all natural, one ingredient foods. Those are the basics that I kind of stick to. If it's a one ingredient food, it's pretty safe. If it's not a one ingredient food, probably not that safe.
That's all I wanted you to discuss on types of diet because we don't need
It's like the outside of the grocery store idea.
Right. Things on the perimeter are usually the healthiest. Everything in the center is usually boxed or garbage. Okay. So as long as we know that's really the type of the diet, and again, this kind of goes into types of diet. I don't think we really need to touch on it here.
Okay, so I got some excerpts from you guys. Type of diet from Etomo Farm. So this is all about crickets, okay?
Okay.
So we got here, in the modern age of readily available sweet soda and simplified low fiber carbohydrates, our bodies can only handle certain thresholds before becoming reservoirs of metabolic damage.
Which we know.
In animal models, amyloid plaque developed in the pancreas and brain as a consequence of sucrose ingestion, sucrose being sugar, okay? And elevated blood sugars and insulin. Metabolic syndrome and type 3 diabetes, also known as Alzheimer's, as a resultant disorders in addition to cancer, obesity, and degenerative joints. So it's not really surprised by that statement. We kind of know everything true there. Right? All these facts are true. We already know this. This is an excerpt from a PDF that you guys have, okay? Now we're going to talk about cricket flour, which is kind of cool. Cricket flour kind of became popular about, I would say, 3 or 4 years ago. Some of my mentors, people I looked up to, especially in the United States, were already eating cricket snacks and using cricket flour. It wasn't really up here in the Canadian market as of yet. Beatrice was actually really big on cricket flour.
I saw something on Shark Tank where a guy started to make something protein based from cricket. So in the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, protein based. It's insects. Insects are full of protein. Okay. The average dietary intake of fiber in the Western civilization is approximately 16 grams of dietary fiber. Cricket flour is estimated to be between 6 to 8 grams per 100 grams. So that is a high amount of fiber per 100 grams. And so if an individual consumes only 100 grams of cricket flour, they can increase their total fiber by 50%. And we understand when it comes to the microbiome how important indigestible and digestible fiber is in our diet in order to feed our microbiology. And so these things are important. In the farm in Barbados, Paul Bourne actually uses crickets to help feed a lot of the chickens.
Yep. And there you go.
Kind of cool, eh?
Crickets.
So crickets are powerful. They're used a lot. They're used a lot in the alternative healing space. It's a cool alternative food to that of like almond flour and things like that when we're trying to find grain alternatives.
Yeah, grain alternatives. And by the way, they don't look like crickets. I've tried stuff that's made from cricket. It tastes good.
Yeah, it tastes great.
Tastes quite well. Yeah.
This is like the idea of the ego, you know, and people's brains getting in the way.
All right, definition of diet.
Definition of diet. So we got two main definitions. The first one, the kinds of food that a person, animal, or community habitually eats, such as a vegetarian diet. You know, that's pretty conceptual there. Yep. The other definition, a special course of food to which one restricts oneself either to lose weight or for medical reasons. I'm going on a diet, ... So we do not really speak in the definition of the second one per se, like I'm going on a diet. We're making lifestyle changes relative to supporting one's microbiome.
So more like medical reasons, natural medical in some sense.
It's interesting, right? Because in the beginning, I'm going to say we need to go on an antifungal diet because of the fact that we need to not feed the fungal properties.
Correct.
But once we clean up those fungal properties, we seal the gut and we got good microbiology in there, you don't need to eat that diet. Typically, you can move to something of like a paleo diet, which is really just all natural food.
So you're directing a diet to solve an issue.
Technically, technically it's kind of sad we have to call it a paleo diet when it's just real food because people eat so much junk.
Well, just like we have to call things organic when that should be the norm.
When it's all poison.
So it is unfortunate. All right, now food intolerances. Again, by this point, any of the students in this group will probably have a lot of reasons to understand about food intolerances, especially when you start to test. So let's answer these quickly. Let me ask, and you can just quickly let the audience know here. Why do we develop a food intolerance? Like, what's the simple answer?
So we have some demographics or some graphics we're going to go over afterwards. But we develop food intolerances primarily because of leaky gut. Okay, this is a concept that we talked heavily on in our microbiome and gut lecture.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we develop food intolerances because of leaky gut. It's pretty simple. The body does not understand that, doesn't know the difference between a kiwi and psychological stress.
Correct.
If you eat a kiwi every single day while under immense amounts of psychological stress, as we know through the gut-brain axis, which creates leaky gut, well, guess what? Your body's gonna think you're intolerant to that item.
And all of a sudden when I eat it?
You get headaches, bloating, gas, skin, itchy. Let's go through the gamut of things that leaky gut can cause, as we know pretty much everything connects. So we develop food intolerances primarily from eating the same foods all the time while under high amounts of physical or psychological stress. Pretty simple. Can this be corrected? 100%. Does it take time? Yes. Just removing the foods and adding in a digestive enzyme and a probiotic will not fix the problem.
Correct.
And I'm telling you that from experience. It generally will not fix the problem. What will happen is you removed the foods from your diet, you put new foods in, and sooner or later, all your new foods you will be intolerant to because you didn't work on what was creating the leaky gut in the first place.
The intolerance in the first place.
You didn't work on whether it was the fungal pattern, parasitic pattern, bacterial pattern, heavy metal pattern, chemical residue pattern. You didn't work on whether it was that solar plexus issue, confidence, personal power, self-will, that emotional pattern. You didn't work on whatever that layer is that was creating the biochemical internal environment in the first place.
So let me go through these two questions. You kind of answered them. Can food intolerances be reversed? We said yes. There's
Are food intolerances common? Yes, they are very common.
I would say yes because if most of the world has leaky gut and a lot of people have leaky gut, then that
food intolerances are very common. When I was a bodybuilder, I was intolerant to, I would say 80% of the foods that I was actually eating. I had to do the AIP diet when I was trying to fix my gut, and it was mainly bone broth and lots of fasting, and I honestly had a list of about 10 items. And that was all I could eat because I was intolerant to so many things to the point that if I ate, I would fall asleep. So are food intolerances common? Yes. The benefit of the bioscan is that you could test over 180 different food items for free if you wanted to.
That's part of the protocol, which we can touch on, but absolutely can be tested for. We do have that, absolutely.
Can food intolerances be reversed? Yes, they can be reversed. It takes time and patience. When do we test for food intolerances? Well, this is relative to the client, the case, the situation, everything like that. Out of my experience, when we're doing clinical work and someone comes in for their first appointment and we find all sorts of fungal things going on, and I recommend an antifungal diet, adding a food intolerance on top of the antifungal diet can be very, very restrictive for a lot of people.
So don't test for food intolerances. Let's kind of.
I didn't say that.
No, I'm not saying you are. Just
it's
be
relative.
clear on it.
It's relative, right?
Okay.
So it could be a lot for someone.
Right.
But someone else could actually handle it very well. Okay. So let's say they're on an antifungal diet, they love spinach, they love kale, and they love beef.
And they're tolerant to them.
And they're intolerant to all of them.
Which I have been myself.
Well, then is the diet going to work very well for them?
Not going to be a great idea.
Not necessarily. So this is where it's relative.
Right.
We have to understand what's going on. Okay. If in the follow-up appointment that person doesn't really feel all that better, well then maybe I'm just going to ask, hey, what are the major foods that you're eating consistently? Okay. And let's just check those really fast. Okay. You know what I'm saying? Yep. With your food intolerance folders in the bioscan, I could just easily test the meat department and the vegetable department and have that information right there for you if you're following an antifungal diet, which is primarily meat and vegetables. Yep. Because we know that lectins feed fungal properties.
Right, another issue, yes.
Another issue that can cause leaky gut, lectins. If you don't know it, look it up, Dr. Gundry. Okay?
How important are they in the overall picture, food intolerances?
They are very important, you know. Typically, if you don't test right away, testing food intolerances somewhere between the 3 to 6 month mark, maybe like your third, fourth appointment, is important because if you should have really moved someone's gut health pretty far in that first 3 months.
So that now we want to go in and specifically.
Now they don't necessarily need to be antifungal 1 or antifungal 2. They're starting to feel better, so they start opening their food categories up, and it's like, okay, dairy. Don't touch it, you know. Yes. Maybe you can do okay with like a goat milk or a goat yogurt. Correct. Or like a sheep yogurt. Yep. Maybe you still find you're intolerant to beef, so you got to stay away from beef for a longer period of time. You know. Yeah. Again, food quality. Like there's a lot of conversations, right?
And now, just quickly, what's the difference between a food allergy then? And let's talk about. Well, we know food intolerance. We spoke about it, so we understand.
Well, the difference between food allergy and food intolerance primarily has to do with the type of immune response that one is getting. So someone would be like, oh, I went to the doctor, they pricked my skin, and they didn't find anything. Yeah, because those are food allergies. Shellfish allergy, peanut allergy, nut allergy. Those are allergies, histamine responses, anaphylactic shocks.
Can those be reversed?
Those cannot be reversed. Oh, I don't even want to say those cannot be reversed because I know in the energetic realm people have reversed them. Okay. But from my point of view, if you have a food allergy, I'm not going to try to convince you that you don't have a food allergy.
That's a little different. Tolerance has to do with more
but when it comes to food intolerances, we're speaking more of a leaky gut conversation. Okay. It's more of a IgG response. Again, different types of immune responses. All you need to know is that a food intolerance, that immune reaction can happen between 1 and 14 days after consuming. And that inflammation lingers in the body. A histamine response, that initial allergic reaction, that anaphylactic reaction, does happen right away, right after eating it. Those are your big indicators as to the two. And so when someone's like, I eat something, I don't really feel that good, we're not talking about an allergy, we're talking about a food intolerance, which can be remedied. A food allergy, of course, generally people have EpiPens for, because we're talking about closing of the
trachea,
the esophagus, the tongue, the lips,
swelling up, and you can't
basically they can't breathe, things of that nature. So those are our concepts there. Okay.
Now, just to finish up, if I had a food allergy and maybe I had food intolerances, and we work on the intolerances, we work on the leaky gut, people go through these phases. Have you seen?
Yeah, totally.
People's allergies
get better. They can go away. Okay. I mean, people say the medical system says they grow out of them, whatever that means.
It means we don't know what we're talking about. So if you grow out of it,
who knows? As the system grows and morphs and changes,
it's very
it's very possible, right? Yeah. So I have definitely seen people with citrus allergies that have improved and gotten better and not be as bad. Okay, so there you can see food allergies versus intolerance. I did put a nice little link in there for you guys that you can take a look at that and do a little deep reading. She put some good information in there. It's called gutsygirl.com, okay? And I just took a little excerpt from her article there. So we have food intolerance and hypersensitivity. Yes, these two are basically the same. Food intolerances are also known as a non-IgE mediated food sensitivity. Okay, so basically, it's like a branch off. So when it comes to the different, you'll see when you read the article, when it comes to the different immune reactions, there's like 5 different immune reactions, and then they have subcategories as each. So the main statement that's important there, a food intolerance and hypersensitivity will not trigger an allergic reaction, okay?
Big difference.
Those are your main things that you're trying to look at. You are not a specialist in food sensitivities. You know, at the end of the day, make sure people are eating what they need to eat to support their microbiome. If they have food sensitivities, we take them out and we work on supporting the system. And as we do that, their food sensitivities should start to improve. Now, just because you improve their leaky gut does not mean that they can just have dairy again with no issues.
Correct.
Like, especially our quality dairy here in North America. You know, I'm technically not intolerant to gluten, but if I eat a lot of gluten here in North America, I generally don't feel very good.
Likewise.
You know, I really don't, but if I ever have ice cream or any sort of dairy, I get congested. That's just what happens, primarily because of the food quality. I was in Barbados and I had raw goat milk, like a raw turmeric tea with goat milk. I didn't even feel like I drank milk.
Yeah, quite a big difference.
It was insane.
It is.
So food quality, okay? And then you can see there a nice little infographic in relation to our food sensitivities and leaky gut, right? So you can see at the very bottom there, brain fog, inflammation, food sensitivities. You know. So basically from the right, we have our tight junction going all the way to our leaky gut on the left. And that's where you start to see the bloodstream underneath where it says bacteria, toxins, undigested food particles. And that's where the immune system becomes hypersensitive because it sees the food particles. So when you're eating these foods with leaky gut, they get into the bloodstream and you get that immune reaction.
That becomes the problem. And I like what you said here. You mentioned thus people tend to spin their wheels for years trying to figure out what's wrong. You had mentioned that a tolerance doesn't happen right away, so we don't really know. And if they're allergic reactions or something different. Excellent. I think
a lot of people are like, oh my God, that's my favorite food. Yeah, because we're intolerant to the things we eat all the time. All right? Last slide here, leaky gut, leaky liver, leaky brain.
Oh boy,
We're going to definitely talk more about this in relation to Module 8.
Correct.
Causal chains, things of that nature.
That'll all come in. We've got the connection.
So this is really how they all connect together, but I'm giving you a little insight now because it's very important as to how our nutrition plays in with this is kind of like tying it all together.
Absolutely.
And how nutrition plays in with overall health.
Leaky gut, leaky liver.
So, you know, we have here, I'm going to read off of yours.
Yes.
Mine's a little small. So, practice point, and you have this lecture, you have this this PDF already. It's called the Psychobiome. Kind of relates to the PNEI system, Psychoneuroendocrine Immunology system.
Right.
Okay? So our baby boomer patients, gastrointestinal and mental disorders today can stem from the earliest moments of birth and mistakes in the first year of life. How many people are C-section? How many people have antibiotics and vaccine load in the first year of life?
Tons.
Thus, their over-inflammatory depositions have predisposed for over 60 years. Their ingrained inflammatory behaviors have deep roots that impact the efficacy of our natural remedies today. More importantly, LPS, we talked about that, lipopolysaccharides, little pieces of shit. And they're linked to depression, okay? Science discovered that lipopolysaccharide levels are often elevated in people experiencing depression. Now remember, or actually right here, LPS are endotoxins, right? Inside toxins. Exotoxins are outside toxins that are found in the cell walls of gram-negative bacteria that activate inflammation via macrophage response, which increases interleukin-1, TNF, basically cytokines, right? You're basically...
construction workers going to do the work.
We have it here, histamines, nitric oxide cascades that cause toxic shock, immune reaction, and fever. And this is the GI's first defense of the insidious cascades of probiotic microbiome. So essentially, you have candida, different types of bacteria, mycotoxins, fungal patterns, mold patterns. They all create LPS when they're fed glucose, whether it's from sugar, whether it's from fruit, whether it's from carbohydrates. Like, no matter the source, breaks down into glucose, feeds these things create LPS, endotoxins, little pieces of shit. Those endotoxins clog up the system, giving us all the symptomology that we would have in relation with leaky gut. Go back for a second.
Nope, sorry.
And it relates back to Depression, right? Depression, anxiety, like guys, go through the list. Like they're all relative. So this is where if gram-negative bacteria or these, bad bacteria, these bad microorganisms in the gut are creating LPS, then I need to eat in a way that doesn't feed the problem.
Right.
If I'm trying to manage my health.
Which goes back to the diet and why we recommend certain
And this
things.
is why the dietary aspect is so important and what we're talking about. Something else I will also add, this kind of goes into the protocol idea, but we have to remember, high level, our body is never trying to kill us.
Always trying to
Ever.
save
The body is the most resilient thing that I have ever witnessed.
It is. It's
It's
incredible.
insane. People literally try to kill themselves daily and don't die.
Because we get signs all the time. Whether it's the
all
skin,
the time.
whether it's
So
a headache, whether it's...
the body is super resilient,
Yeah.
and it has the capacity to heal when you give it what it needs. So we have to understand that when people are full of this bad microbiology, it's generally because the body is using it as a defense mechanism.
Correct.
I see liver leaks in people's livers all the time that are full of chemical residues, xenoestrogens, and heavy metals. I see it regularly. We clean up the environmental toxicity, and the microbes kind of just go away on their own. When the microbes do not go away on their own, then there is a low vibe resonating frequency, anger, hate, shame, guilt, whatever it is. Why do we know that? Because some of you may have experienced this, but a lot of people in our QHI community have already experienced this as they go through emotional changes. And we could call it evolutions, microevolutions, or as Mick Goswami would call it, a quantum leap, or do different energy work or plant medicine ceremonies. They have the shedding of the system, whether usually in the form of GI distress of some sort or whatever it is, people passing worms and all sorts of things. And then all of a sudden they feel lighter and they feel freer and they've like dislodged this energy from the system. And when this energy moves out of the system, the bugs go with it. So the idea of bugs in nature, and this was a concept I learned from Paul Chek, was that bugs bring dead and decaying things back to the earth.
Right. I mean,
That's their job. So if we're if we have this
cow in the ground, and
if
how
we
it
have
starts-
this low vibe frequency, then what is the body what are the bugs trying to do to us? More importantly, trying to bring the toxicity, trying to handle this environmental toxicity in the body and get it out, right? And mind you, when we eat all the junk food we eat, it's garbage. Our bodies are trying to figure out how to deal with all that garbage, okay? Last little point here. Gut microbiome, causative into depression, inflammation, autoimmune. We talked about that already. Begs the question, what are all the things that disturb the gut microbiome? Okay, and I mean, you have it here, like we're basically coming to terms with things that we've known in the past, decade at least, that I've been doing this. Paul Chek's been doing this stuff for
it isn't
30,
new
40 years.
information,
It's not new. It's just really coming together in terms of like this mind-body connection, the gut-brain axis, things of that nature. Okay? Last little piece here. This is bridging the idea of leaky gut and leaky brain, okay? Any assault on the intestinal psychobiome, medications, herbicides, gluten, hybridized gluten, pesticides, stress, infectious microorganisms, chlorine and fluoride from our water, excessive alcohol, vaccines, GMO foods, food additives, commercial meat with antibiotics,
fish, milk.
sets the stage for the body's innate immune system to increase inflammation. When the intestinal barrier becomes involved, the resultant inflammation, really mitochondrial distress,
right.
and free radical oxidation, ROS, reactive oxygen species, the brain is going to suffer. The blood-brain barrier becomes weaker. Things get in and out. So we know if we have leaky gut, we have leaky brain because the microbiology of the gut affect our neuropeptides, hormones of the brain. Okay? So that is your beginning idea in relation to leaky gut and leaky brain. One more slide here. Now we're bridging leaky gut with leaky liver. So you can see here, then this is specifically from, I gave the PDF to you guys. It's all about, it's actually a book. It's an actual text.
Just click the slide on our presentation.
It's an actual textbook. It's an actual textbook, and it was about what, 175 US. So it's yours. My gift to you guys. And this specific article or slide is from a research study done on alcoholic disease. alcoholic fatty liver. And you can see here in the left-hand photo, everything looks good. In the left-hand photo, you can see it says alcohol abuse. Alcohol creates oxidative stress, leads to increased permeability in the system. ZO is zonulin, okay? That is basically when you have high levels of zonulin, there's an increase in intestinal permeability. Yeah. It's one of the things, one of the hormones that functional medicine looks for. Apparently, they're changing the paradigms as to what that means in terms of biochemistry, but something to look for. So you can see increased permeability, which leads to translocation of crap in the system, which Dr. Cass speaks about, which is why we always have lymph drainage. And then you can see LPS. Now, that leaky gut photo there on the right-hand side does lead to what you can see in the liver. So lipid accumulation, fatty liver, damage. Notice ALT and AST. So your clients will say, oh, but my liver enzymes are fine. Liver enzymes, you only see high ALT and AST when there's already liver damage. So what's happening in the whole time in between before you get to liver damage?
So I could be, I know we read somewhere, we know.
Well, that's Dr. Brockenshire, right, 80%.
I could have my liver operating at only 20%
before
capacity.
You actually see something.
So in other words, I'm only operating at 60%. I go to a doctor, he says, oh, you're fine, your liver's completely perfect.
You're healthy, there's nothing wrong with you.
Yes.
Right?
Okay, just to be clear.
And so you can see increase in lipid accumulation, which is basically fatty liver, leads to inflammation increases, and then you have higher increases of ROS, reactive oxygen species, which is basically oxidation of the system. Yep. And that's why we talk about grounding, structured water, ionized water, all the things that factor into how we manage oxidation and bring someone back to health.
They're going to love where this came from, that book you just said.
Yeah, that's great.
This is fantastic. So really enjoy that one. It's 323 pages, by the way.
So that last page there, this is really starting to pull everything together in this grand idea that we need to understand as to how to get someone from where they are to where they want to be. The last thing I want to speak about, because we talked about fatty liver here a little bit.
Yep.
Fatty liver was perceived to be a obesity only
in the past,
issue
yes.
or concern.
People only had it when they were overweight, correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of people have what's called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease.
Yeah.
I had a 26-year-old firefighter that has fatty liver. I've had many clients and patients that, I don't say patients, clients that are not alcoholics. Yep. And they have fatty liver from high fructose corn syrup, medication use. People are smoking Juul packs and like all sorts of chemical things that are just in our lifestyle, right? So we're seeing fatty liver more and more and more. And it's so common that a lot of doctors are not even telling their clients or their patients that they have fatty liver.
It's almost accepted because it's where society is.
Yeah, today. One of our clients had a little spot on their liver, and she was concerned and she asked about it, and they didn't really acknowledge it all that much. And that's kind of scary to know that you have a little lesion on your liver and the doctor doesn't even really pay attention to it because it's not bad enough.
Right, and if they run blood tests, some of these tests are going to look normal.
Well,
sometimes.
you may not, again,
see it.
ALT, AST are the two values they look at, and that is only going to show up when there's damage.
Right.
So if there isn't damage, then there's nothing there and everything's perceived as fine. So the only way you really see a fatty liver is basically ultrasound, generally MRI, things like that. And those are harder and harder to get these days. People don't really don't really do that or look at that.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Okay, nutrition.
So that is nutrition. That is module 6. Module 7 is going to now take the last 6 modules, put them into a
looping everything together.
It starts to loop it.
Yeah.
Module 9 we introduced, which was business, and then we'll do module 8, which will kind of tie the rest of everything together.
Yeah, well, the next module we're really trying to look at it from a protocol perspective. How do we really help support a system and move them forward based off of all the information that we've already prefaced? I would say the first 6 modules is the first page of our consult sheet.
It really truly is. And when you see, for anyone here who's not practicing it, when they see the consult, they're going to be shocked to see it took 6 modules to really do a couple of simple things.
Yeah. Like you need all of that background information to really fill out that first side.
You really do.
And use that information to develop the proper protocol on the backside. So now that we have all this information, we can now look on the backside and look at our, our toolkit and see what type of amazing remedies we have to really move people forward in terms of their health.
Really excited, guys. We'll see you in the next module.